welcome to Common Errors in Python. This is part one of a three-part series. Part one is about syntax errors, and we'll be walking through a couple of common or a few different types of common errors and how to spot them and that sort of thing. So let's get started. So first thing first is we got to talk about a syntax error. A syntax error means that the code is just entered incorrectly and the program doesn't even start. So this is something like something's misspelled, or it's like you have the wrong grammar, the wrong syntax of the program. So I'm going to show you some examples here. So let me just show you now. If I run this program, I'm using Visual Studio Code. I'm on a Mac, but it will work on any system with Python 3.0 and above. So we've got common errors, one, syntax errors. There's no errors here. Okay. So the first kind of common error that you'll see is the wrong number of parentheses. Parentheses need to be balanced. So you can see here we got a left parenthesis and a right parenthesis. Left and left. So let's leave one of those off, and then let's run the program again. Okay, so you can see syntax error, unexpected EOF while parsing, and it tells you the error is in line 5. Okay, so let's go to line 5, and now you see that line 5 has nothing, so how could there possibly be an error? Line 5 just happens to be the last line of this program. So when you look at a line and you don't see a problem, go to the previous line. You see a problem there? Obviously, no, there's nothing. So go to the next previous line, and you'll see here, the problem is in here. So it's missing a parenthesis. The EOF means end of file. So what happens is when you try to run a Python program, it parses the file and just converts your code into, I guess it's kind of bytecode type thing, and then it runs it based on that. Now, if it doesn't find exactly what it needs, or if there's a problem, it stops and gives you a syntax error. So I can fix that just by adding. So if you get a weird problem like that, look for mismatched parentheses. Okay, so if you have an extra parenthesis, let's see what happens. Okay, so now this one, it does tell you exactly where the error is. So you look down here at the error. So you got the file, which I'm running. We've got line 3, and it says invalid syntax. And it's actually pointing where it thinks the problem is. Now, it's a computer. It's not always accurate, but in this case, it is pretty accurate. Okay, so that is very common. So especially when you have like a mathematical formula, look for parentheses that are mismatched. Okay. Next type of error you'll find, which I see quite often, are either spelling or capitalization errors. So a spelling error obviously just means something spelled wrong. Capitalization means that something's capitalized it shouldn't be, or something is not capitalized and it should be. So I'll show you a few examples of that. So let's say we forget the T in system. So I'm going to run that. Okay, so you'll see here, so the screen doesn't get clear because it's not working. So you see here line 2 tells you. So it's pretty good in a lot of cases of telling you where these basic types of errors are. So OS system clear. So it says attribute error. Module OS has no attribute sysm. Okay, so no attribute sysm. So it's telling you that it doesn't know what sysm means. Now, of course, as a human being, we know it's a spelling error, but this could have just been something that doesn't exist with the OS module. So anytime you'll see this kind of pattern, something dot something. This is a module. It could be an object. There's a couple different things it can be. So it doesn't have that attribute. Look in that area, and it's basically telling you it doesn't know what this is. So you gotta say, oh yeah, I spelled that wrong. Okay. Now if I did this, and let's run that one. Okay, so name error says name OSS is not defined. Okay, and again, it tells you right here, line 2. Okay, so look for the line number. Okay, we know what file we're in right now. Line 2, and it says OSS is not defined. So it has no idea what OSS means. Okay, so we look at, oh yeah, it's OS. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Now this error you'll also get if it's an external module, if you don't import it. And if you don't know what that means yet, that's fine, but at some point you will. So if you forget to import something, that will definitely happen. So let me run that. Okay, so again, we get a name error in line 2. It says name OS is not defined. So even Visual Studio Code underlines it. Nice for you. So you just have to make sure you import OS. Okay. So that's one of the major types of common errors. So you're looking at spelling or capitalization errors. Oh, let me explain capitalization real quick. So let's say I typed print. Now notice it's not highlighted correctly anymore. But if I run it, okay, see again, print is not defined. Okay, again, line 3. So it really does a good job of telling you, especially when you're a beginner, of the types of errors that you might encounter. It really kind of tries to tell you where those errors are. Syntax errors are the easiest type to find and to fix because they're usually just spelling or capitalization and a few other little things. Okay, so that is that. So now I fixed it. I'm going to run it. Okay, so you notice now it's working. So I clear the screen. If you're a Windows user, this should be CLS. I am not a Windows user. Right now I'm on a Mac, but usually I use Linux. So Mac and Linux, it's clear. The next type of common error is to forget to put a colon at the end of certain types of statements. So for example, if I say x equals 3, if x equals 3, print, hey, x equals 3. X equals 3. Okay, not a very useful code. Let's test it, make sure it's working correctly. Okay, x equals 3. Now, in this type of error, we forgot to put a colon. So at the end of an if statement, you need a colon. So let's run that. And you'll see here, line 7, invalid syntax error, x equals 3, and it's pointing at the 3. Okay, so it's kind of telling you that the problem is around here somewhere. So again, I have to remember in my head, oh, it's an if statement. I need to put a colon at the end. There's other types of statements that require that. So for x in range 0, 3, let's say print x. So again, I need to put a colon at the end of a for statement. If I make a function, def my function, oh, that's terrible. My function. I need to put a colon at the end of that line too. And once you get to something like classes, my class, you need to put a colon at the end. So forgetting a colon, it tells you right where the error is. That's an easy one for the computer to spot. So that's a very common type of mistake that you will see, especially as a beginner. Let's see here. And there's one more that I think is probably a fairly common for relative beginners, is using the wrong choice of parentheses, brackets, and braces. So parentheses, brackets, and braces. So parentheses are used in function calls for the most part. So here we have print, parenthesis, and it prints that. So if I make a mistake, and I don't know what I'm thinking, I put that. And actually, we may or may not get an error. We'll see. And oh yeah, we do. So line 3, there's an error. It says built-in function or method object is not subscriptable. Okay, so that's kind of cryptic, especially if you're a beginner. But what you need to know is that brackets are used to pull individual characters out of a string or items out of a list, things like of that nature. So I need to have parentheses around here. Yeah, there we go. Let's say, same type of thing. If I say like, name equals Bob, and what I want to do, let's say, is I want to print the first letter. I say print name. Again, if you don't know what all these things are, that's okay. You will at some point. Just kind of keep it in mind that things need to be done correctly. So if I do this, this should print the B, because B is index 0 of the string, so B. But let's say if I did this, I put parentheses around it instead of brackets. Okay, you get some kind of weird, oh, well, put extra parentheses. That was because I didn't have balanced parentheses. So you said line 10, end of file, like I talked about earlier. So I had imbalance. Let's run that again. Okay, so string object is not callable. So when you use a function, it's called calling a function. So this is a string. It's a bunch of text, and the parentheses say to call a function. But since it's not a function, I can't do that. Let's see what happens when we put braces in there. I'm kind of curious. Never tried that before. Okay, just invalid syntax on line 6. Braces are used for making dictionaries, which are kind of like arrays in other languages. So let's put that back to the way it was. And because I want to print the 0th character, which is B. Okay. So anyway, we've looked at a few different types of common syntax errors. Especially for beginners, you want to look at making sure that you have the correct number of parentheses. Make sure you read the error message. It'll tell you exactly where it thinks the error is, and usually it's pretty close. And like I said, if that line looks fine, go up a line. And if that line looks fine, go up a line. Okay. Make sure you spell things correctly, because the computer cannot tell the difference. A human can tell misspelled words, computers cannot. Make sure things are capitalized correctly. And especially if you're using a text editor like this one, you'll see these keywords are colored a certain type of color, and that tells you that you've basically done that correctly. Make sure if you're using if statements, def for defining a function, while, class, and if, I already mentioned, you need a colon at the end of that line. And then also, you look at the wrong choice. Make sure that you are using parentheses where you need parentheses, brackets where you need brackets, and braces where you need braces. And I think that's it. Okay. Yeah, we'll stop there.